Everyone has to live somewhere, and everyone has to invest their money someplace. So what happens when where you live meets up with where your money is invested? Hello, real estate. Hey, welcome back to Big Money Real Estate. I'm Ilyce. Here's your daily update. So today I want to dig into some findings from the 2015 Northwestern Mutual Planning and Progress Study. And this examined Americans' attitudes towards their money, their finances. The report's being released in parts, and the first segment deals with millennials and their money issues. And I invited Chantel Bonneau on the show with me to talk about the findings. She's a wealth management advisor for Northwestern Mutual, and she writes for the mintgrad.org, which is Northwestern Mutual's financial resource for millennials. And best of all, she happens to be a millennial herself. And unlike many of her peers, she's already a homeowner. So big stuff there. Hey, Chantelle, welcome to Big Money Real Estate.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's nice to have you here. So I love that you're a homeowner, and I love that you are a financial advisor. The financial industry is really, telling me that they need about another 150,000 people like you, in addition, in order to manage funds for all of us as we age and as your generation ages. So it's great that you've chosen this as a profession.
Thank you. It is a very exciting career opportunity with all of the growth in our industry, and so many people, both millennials, baby boomers, every generation is really understanding the value of having their finances in order. So it's a great opportunity.
Well, you hear a lot of information about millennials, but one of the things that I think people don't even realize, and that your study touched on, is that 64% of millennials classify themselves as being more inclined to save rather than spend, and more than half of them, about 53%, have set financial goals, compared with 38% of Americans aged 35 and older. Did this surprise you as a millennial when you look around your peers?
It didn't really surprise me. I thought so much of the data was really interesting that came out in that planning and progress report. And working with millennials on a daily basis, it really didn't surprise me. So many of my peers are really focused on saving for their future, what they can do to impact their planning moving forward. And they're really focused on this being a centralized topic in their life to help them make positive decisions financially.
Now, oh, I'm sorry.
It was a very great study, and I'm glad that we're getting some focus on that and what good things millennials are doing.
Well, 73% of millennials expect that they will need to work past the age of 65 because Social Security isn't going to take care of their needs. And yet a third of them say that they're not at all responsible when it comes to their money, which is interesting. That's still a much higher percentage than for, other areas, other populations. So when you look at this number, and you're a millennial, do you feel like people are going to need to work past 65 because Social Security won't exist? Or are you thinking that, 65 and you might have, lived to be 100, so 35 years in retirement, you probably are going to want to need longer. What's your take on those numbers?
I think it's a combination of both of those things. So from one side, I think most millennials believe that certain entitlements that we are used to, such as Social Security, will not exist in the same form, 40, 30 years from now when we would be potentially experiencing them. So there's that feeling and that sentiment that we're going to have to save more and be responsible for the future that we want and what retirement will look like for us. On the other hand, to what you spoke to, we might all live to be 100 or 105. That may be the norm down the road. So, being in retirement for 40 or 45 years just might not be realistic. It takes a lot of money to be able to survive the way that you would like to in retirement. So people may be looking, as millennials start to age, to how do we have a retirement trajectory that looks a little bit different and maybe elongates more. So I think it's a combination of we may have to work because of the necessity to be able to fund those longer years, and maybe there's going to be an increased desire to work a little bit longer, a little bit more creatively, so that you can spend your retirement years differently than how we see them today.
Right. I think there's definitely a shifting. I mean, you see it. Your generation is really experiencing what I would call an elongated life, where
Absolutely.
You don't even start thinking about getting married until your late 20s or early 30s. The average age of a first-time home buyer has risen from, in the last 20 years, it was like 26 and a half, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And today, right now, it's almost 34 years old. That is a huge shift in a 20-year period. So you're marrying later. It's taking you longer to get through college. unfortunately, longer to figure out what you want to do, longer to buy your first house. And so if you're buying your first house, having kids, that's moving later. You're now seeing that well into people's 40s. And so everything's kind of shifting out, and all of that is just going to elongate the length of time where you actually need money, to your point, to support it. Now, in terms of millennials, we saw a generation, the first half of the millennial generation, that was coming of age, and meaning by that I mean really coming out of college, right around 2008, 2009, when the economy completely derailed. And that 7 or 8 year period of millennials has had a very tough time getting started with their careers. And yet, 59% of millennials expect their financial situation to improve this year, according to the survey. That's well above what the general public is thinking. Only 41% of the general public is expecting their financial situation to improve. And 71% of millennials feel secure that they're going to achieve the financial goals they've set for themselves. What's your take on some of those numbers and the feeling that millennials may or may not be in a much better position today to take advantage of the resurging economy?
So a couple of things. To your first point, there is a new period of life that a lot of millennials have from maybe 22 to 27, 28, where they're really spending time focused on themselves. It's less about getting married earlier or starting a family as early. And part of that, I think, is leading to the sentiment that more millennials are focused on what they can do financially. They want to feel comfortable and confident financially before entering into some of those decisions. A lot of millennials think it's harder to just figure it out. They want to have some confidence in where they're progressing financially. So I think that ties into the fact that we're seeing more millennials believing that they can impact their financial future, that they can either lower some debt, maybe it's student loan debt or consumer debt that they acquired at some point, or just saving more, being more focused on retirement a little bit early. So that delayed adolescence has both pros and cons to it. But one of the pros that we're seeing is this focus on saving more and understanding how they can impact their financial trajectory now.
Yeah, I love that. The whole idea of saving money for the future is so intangible, and yet, this is the time where even a very small amount of money that you put away in your 20s, even $2,000 or $3,000 a year, can translate into well over $1 million to $2 million if you get to retirement at age 75 or 80, because you really just have this incredible power of compound earnings that just goes to bat for you year in and year out. And as long as it's invested in something earning back something more than 1%, over time you're going to do it. Now, I understand you have a few tips for millennials who are hoping to buy a house someday, because I know that I've heard from my kids' friends who are millennials that the idea of spending $300,000 or $400,000 on a house when their first job out of college, they maybe are earning $40,000 and they have $100,000 in college expenses. Those numbers are really real, but they aren't really conducive to home buying.
So yes, I mean, that's one thing that I'm seeing a lot with my millennial clients, is that there are so many factors happening at once. There's student loan debt. Usually it's pretty significant that they're trying to pay down. They're trying to begin saving for their future, for retirement or a wedding or something else that's going to happen. And a lot of people are still, despite the fact that the age of home ownership is going up, a lot of people are really focused on wanting to own property at some point. And I think it depends, obviously, what part of the country you live in and the cost of living for how much of a reality that may or may not be. But it is a huge focus for a lot of millennials wanting to understand at what point in their life will they be able to own property. And so whenever that topic comes up with my millennial clients, I try and bring 3 key points to mind to help them come to some conclusion. The first one is to get real. And what I mean by that is create a budget for yourself. What's the realistic amount you could actually spend on an ongoing mortgage? How much can you realistically save to get yourself to a down payment so that we can actually accomplish all of the things that we need to accomplish? The second one is to really look at what you can afford only. I have so many millennial clients that come in and we talk about what they potentially could afford, and they come back later and try and keep pushing the budget. And it's not my money to spend, it's theirs.
Right.
But it gets very, it's hard to start going to open houses for something way out of your budget, because then of course you want that. So really to stay within your budget and your frame. And the third thing in regard to getting real is to make sure that you don't derail the rest of your planning just to buy property. It's probably not in your best interest. Everyone's different. but it's probably not in your best interest to stop 401k contributions or eliminate all other savings or not having proper risk management tools in place because you're putting every dollar toward a home. That can be a really risky proposition.
Well,
the second big topic is to really calculate the costs of property. Too many people look only at the mortgage and they forget about homeowners insurance. What if the air conditioner breaks? What's the real cost of utilities? If you need flood insurance or earthquake insurance, how much do all of those things cost? And lastly, I always ask my clients, why are you buying, or why do you want to buy? You want to make sure that you're really interested in owning and committing to property, and not just because people tell you it's a good idea or because you heard that there's a tax perk. It's really important to understand all of the components that come along with owning.
Well, I love that you've got this get real, calculate your costs and why buy, because I'm very much about the reality of home ownership. And I can tell that you actually own a house, because once you've owned a house and you're faced with making, our second tax payments are coming up, or should we refinance or not, or wow, that hot water heater just burst and I have to spend $700 to $1,000 to get it to be replaced. Until you've done that, you don't really understand how tangible and how quickly those costs add up. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Chantel Bonneau is a wealth management advisor for Northwestern Mutual, and if you work with her, I can tell you're going to actually get some terrific advice. Chantel, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for watching this episode of Big Money Real Estate. Send me your real estate investing and personal finance questions on Twitter and Facebook. Check out my Intentional Investor series at thinklinkstore.com, and be sure to share this video with all your friends. Until next time, I'm Ilyce.